God of War Ragnarök is the 9th title of the God of War saga that had its first game released on the late PlayStation 2 in 2005, and with this game, it ends the Nordic saga. He is one of the nominees for the Game Awards 2022, running for Game of the Year. Directed by Eric Williams, this game has a plot and narrative different from the other games in the saga. Like the 2018 God of War, which was the 2018 Game of the Year due to the new narrative proposal, where the producers wanted to reimagine the renowned franchise, masterfully directed by Cory Barlog, who also directed God of War 2, 2007. It is worth remembering that the game does not yet have a photo mode or the new game option. Please note that this review does not contain game spoilers. The hype for Ragnarök was so great that, within 5 days of its release, the game had sold over 5.1 million copies, making it the best-selling game at launch on PlayStation, while 2018's God of War sold 3.1 million of copies upon its release. One of the biggest innovations seen in the game is its camera. There are simply no editing cuts, being commonly called a shot in sequence by filmmakers, an element that is very difficult to do, but it provides a gigantic immersion. This was introduced in the 2018 game, but still receives praise for it today. There are saga books that explain several events that were not told in the games. The most recent book was written by James Barlog, Cory's father. It's worth reading them. They are novels that quench the curiosity of fans. God of War Ragnarök is a direct sequel to 2018's God of War, so there will be some spoilers for the 2018 game, which actually served more as a precursor to the most important events in the story. Check out the full review of the 2018 God of War game on the Revolution Arena website, link in the description. The game ran very well on PlayStation 4 at 107.30 GB with 1080p at 30 FPS, on PlayStation 4 Pro at 107.30 GB, and can reach 1656p at 60 FPS, and on PlayStation 5 at 84.06 GB, and can reach 2160p at 30 FPS up to 1440p at 80 FPS. Plot. After the events of the 2018 version of God of War, Kratos and Atreus prepare for the greatest event in Norse mythology, Ragnarök. While looking for answers, several diversities occur that force them to venture through the kingdoms in search of surviving against wild beasts, Norse gods and the rigorous Fimbulwinter, an event that appears after the death of the Aesir god, Baldur, preceding the end of the world. Nordic. Kratos is calmer and wiser than ever. Atreus is more experienced and mature, as he craves answers about the origin of the name, Loki, and prophecies, as well as his thirst for adventure. History. The story of God of War, 2018, was exciting and innovative, for us players who were used to killing everything that appeared in front of us. In this game, Kratos seeks to pass on his knowledge and life experience to Atreus so that he is prepared for any adversity, but he insists on going against his father in search of answers and prophecies. During the journey, many twists and turns happen and, in many moments, Atreus becomes the protagonist. If it weren't for his stubbornness, maybe the game wouldn't be so grand and we wouldn't even meet such interesting characters. Often, the unfolding of the story is slow, tiring, and unnecessarily long. There are many new charismatic characters in the plot that make us appreciate the dialogues and forget about the widespread killing. Many mysteries ensue, but unfortunately, there aren't many answers. The excess of cinematic scenes, tiring parts, and unanswered questions made me a little unmotivated to play. Graphics and setting. As the developers themselves said, this game takes the capabilities of the PlayStation 4 to the extreme, and it really happens. I believe the graphics in this game are the best I've seen on a last-generation console. The game is simply gigantic, with kingdoms that seem to have no end. Each kingdom is very rich and full of details, the fauna and flora is very diverse and complete. Lighting makes graphics more vivid and colorful, providing more immersion than ever before. It makes it look like images taken from real life. Facial expressions are very realistic. We can see the sadness, happiness, and anger stamped on the faces of the characters. This generates a feeling of empathy for them, generating strong emotions in the player, from joy to sadness. To get around long distances we use portals as fast travel, and if you prefer, there are boats and sleds to get around short distances quickly. That's where the best stories are told by the characters, many of which are about Kratos' past. The scenarios are more vertical due to the new mechanics implemented. Kratos doesn't jump, but he launches his blades of chaos at certain points to go up, down, climb and jump from platform to platform. You can even make combos using this mechanic. Graphics during combats are more realistic. You can feel every blow that is given to enemies, as the physics of the weapons gives a feeling of weight and cutting when the blades come into contact with the enemy. That is, it means that it is brutally tearing your skin. Gameplay. The gameplay is similar to its predecessor, but it has some innovations. Just like the previous games, we can attack, defend, parry, dodge, counterattack, climb and use special abilities of weapons and powers. The innovation in this game is due to the possibilities that the scenario itself provides. At many times there are stones, tree logs, trees, poles and mirrors that are used to our advantage in combat. This makes the game much more dynamic and frantic. In addition to being very useful and powerful, this differentiates it from the previous game. We can make combos with the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos, as well as make improvements when collecting resources for this. It is possible to modify runic attacks, each of which has its own properties such as damage, elemental, stun and cooldown. We will also be able to improve each runic attack up to level 3 in exchange for experience. The movement is very solid, consistent and realistic. His son, Atreus, is a natural helper, who is now more experienced and intelligent, thanks to the training Kratos took with him. We have two types of arrows that can be used, sonic and runic. Both have their specificities and are essential for opening the game's chests, as well as solving puzzles and progressing in the story. Atreus can also do runic invocations that consist of invoking an animal that deals a large amount of damage to enemies, in addition to the recharge time as well. There are secret areas and non-er chests that are impossible to reach without companion help. The game has a lot more puzzles than before, having to solve them almost everywhere on the map. Kratos can also change his appearance, being able to change the chest, wrist and waist armor, according to the attributes you want. They are strength, defense, runic, cooldown, vitality and luck. And when upgrading one of these armors to level 9, maximum level, you can select an armor aesthetically pleasing to the player, since the attributes of the armor with the maximum level are maintained. Side quests and new locations are massive. It's almost like there's another game. All weapon upgrades are done in the shop. The shield is more useful than ever. In addition to defending, it is possible to attack and interrupt an unblockable enemy attack, represented by a blue circle. There are 6 shields with different appearance and shape. Each has specific properties as well. During the story mode, it is essential that the player explore the map as much as possible. The game has many super useful items, secondary missions, called favors, which add value to the main story, locations and secret enemies that provide resources to improve the main weapons. That's why it's essential to explore every corner of the map. In the secret enemies, I refer to the Berserk King. They are secret bosses that would be the equivalent of the Valkyries of the last game in that their location is represented by a tombstone. Kratos and Mimir resolve to defeat them so they don't cause any more trouble. They are very strong, so I don't recommend fighting them if you are at levels below 7. There are the Ravens of Odin, which are creatures described in Norse mythology and serve to warn Odin about what happens in the 9 kingdoms. Kratos must eliminate them to save their souls and collect his rewards. There is a life and rage meter that can be increased by collecting apples of Idun and vials of bloody mead. These items are inside chests called non-er. To open them, it is necessary to hit the seals scattered in the same scenario. For this, it is often necessary to use the help of the companion's arrows, and some will only be accessible after obtaining a new skill. Another novelty are the amulets, which serve to provide a certain advantage to the protagonist. Amulets are varied, and many have different and specific properties. It is possible to increase the number of amulets to be used by obtaining the item, Amulet of Yggdrasil, and improving it in the shop. Skills are unlocked by using Kratos or companion's experience in the skill tree. To get experience, you need to fight, collect items and do missions. It is possible to enhance certain skills to make them stronger. The variety of enemies is huge compared to the previous game. There are new enemies, like the humans, which are the Midgardians, but there are also many repeat enemies and their endings are the same. The bosses are much more epic. There are many different bosses. In addition to their appearance and design being more intimidating, the fights with them are more original and different. I got excited about every battle. And by bosses I mean campaign bosses and side quest bosses. There is the Codex, which describes all the information of resources, knowledge, bestiary and lessons obtained during the journey. Soundtrack and sound effects. I think this topic needs no comments. The songs are combined according to the moments we are in. If we are in a fight against a boss, more epic sounds will appear. In many moments we are graced with more medieval and simple music, as if they were tavern music. They're very nice and relaxing, and I think it goes really well with Norse mythology. The sound effects are simply impeccable. Every sound of Kratos' step makes you feel the strength that makes him on that ground. The sound of fauna and flora are very realistic too. The noise of weapons when hitting an enemy, or simply hitting the wind, are very realistic and rustic, as it should be, especially the blades of chaos, which makes a sound as if it were cutting the wind. The Brazilian dubbing is wonderful as always. The dedication that Ricardo Juarez had to play Kratos is surreal. You can see the feeling that the protagonist feels when he speaks. In many moments I realized how tired and exhausted Kratos was from the whole situation, just by the voice. The other voice actors also dedicated a lot to this, and many of them are game fans and loved voicing these characters. The original voice acting is perfect too, as most of the characters' movements were captured in real motion, played by the actors and voice actors. Performance and optimization. During my experience there was nothing that hindered me. As I played on a PlayStation 4 Fat, I experienced rendering issues. I had about 3 crashes that took 5 seconds to return to normal, and the game closed alone once. When I used fast travel it took about 15 seconds to load the location, but that's understandable for a PlayStation 4 as the world is so big and dense. The small issues and bug I had can be easily fixed through updates. Conclusion. The game is simply incredible. The way in which the evolution of the characters was presented is surreal. The developers, programmers, actors and writers did a great job in humanizing the characters. Beautiful graphics and with a lot of exploration. However, it didn't present much newness in terms of gameplay, and the progression of the story was slow and tiring, although the game's exploration factor compensates for these small details, in my point of view. Evaluation. Graphics. 10. Fun. 10. History. 8. Gameplay. 9. Sound. 10. Performance and optimization. 9.5. Final note. 9.4. Review written by Gabriel Capuani and published on the Revolution Arena website.